A man is standing trial for his life, and the scribes writing up the case have a problem with the evidence. The year is roughly 1155 before Christ. The place is Egypt. The charge is conspiracy against the throne. The plotters used wax figures, written spells, potions, the record says, for laming the limbs of men, all of it real, all of it documented. And the court is careful, almost fussy, about one detail. It records exactly where the magic came from. Not a hut at the edge of the desert. Not a witch. It came out of the palace library. The books belonged to the king the conspirators were trying to kill, and the accused are listed by job title. 2 of them are scribes of the House of Life, temple men, insiders. One trial for sorcery survives from the whole of pharaonic Egypt. 3,000 years. This is it. Sorcery against the king was the crime. Sorcery was not. The technique was never on trial, only the target. Hold on to that, because it is going to happen again and again. On 5 continents, we are going looking for the magic workers of the world, the ones people feared and the ones people paid. Circe, the seeress with her iron staff, Baba Yaga in her mortar, Merlin, the exorcists of Nineveh. And here is the thing that took me a long time to see, because almost every retelling hides it. In most of these traditions, magic is not a crime and not a sin. It is a technology, often a licensed one with a payroll. The evil outsider witch is largely a later invention. By the end of this, you will know who built her and what for. Start in Egypt, because Egypt says the quiet part out loud. The Egyptian word is hecate. We translate it as magic, and the translation does almost nothing but damage. Hecate is a force, like heat or weight. It carries no morality. It is simply how things are made to happen. The gods use it. In the Umduat, the sun god beats back the serpent of chaos by means of the Haka of Isis. Heka is also a god in his own right, and wherever he is worshipped, he is the firstborn child of whoever made the world. At Heliopolis, his father is Re-Atum. At Memphis, Tita. At Esna, Conum. The same slot filled locally. In a Middle Kingdom coffin spell 261, the dead man stands and recites that God's credentials. He says he was made by the Soul Lord before duality existed in this land, before there were 2 of anything. He says the universe belonged to him before the gods came into being, and only at the very end does he give the name. I am Heka. That is the theology. Now here is the ethics, and it is blunter than anything the Greeks ever managed. In the instruction for marriage care, a king lists what the Creator gave humanity: heaven, earth, air, food, government. And then last on the list, he made magic for them as weapons to ward off the blow of events. Read that again. Magic is defensive equipment, issued to the human race by its maker because events hit. Nobody in Egypt argues about whether this is permitted. There is no argument to have. It came in the kit. So who works it? Usually a man with a title, the one who carries the festival scroll, the lector priest. He is not a hedge wizard. He is temple staff. He reads the liturgy, runs the rites, holds the roll. And priestly service in Egypt rotated, which means the village magician was very often the local priest, off duty. In the tales of Papyrus Westcar, princes entertain King Khufu with wonders. The wonder workers are chief lector priests. One of them molds a crocodile out of wax, 7 fingers long, speaks over it, and it becomes a real one. Another folds a lake in half to recover a pendant. A girl dropped over the side of a boat. 12 cubits of water resting on 12 cubits of water. He says the words, and the lake obeys. And where do the words live? In the pharaonic, the house of life, the temple scriptorium. It is a restricted archive. Rubrics on the rolls warn that this is a true secret of the house of life, not to be used with the knowledge of the rabble. Magic in Egypt is classified material held by a literate elite, which brings us back to the trial. The conspirators had not stolen a forbidden power. They had a library card. Go east, and the picture gets sharper because Mesopotamia kept its paperwork and buried it in fired clay. In Assyria and Babylonia, the magic worker has a job title, a shipu, usually translated exorcist or incantation priest. He is not a folk healer. He is a scholar with a curriculum. And we still have the reading list. A tablet from Assur, catalogued as KAR 44, sets out the texts an Ashipu was expected to master. The manuscript is Neo-Assyrian. Tradition credited the compilation to a scholar of the 11th century before Christ. Alongside him works the Asu, the physician, who grinds the drugs, binds the body, holds the cup. Textbooks like to make that a clean split, magic on one side, medicine on the other. The tablets refuse to cooperate. In the letters from Esarhaddon's court, one man is described as the exorcist and former deputy chief physician. Same man, both offices. The line we want to draw was simply not there to be drawn, and these were not marginal figures. Consider the inner circle of scholars around Esarhaddon and his son. 17 men wrote to the king regularly. 5 of the 17 were exorcists. Between them, 128 letters survive. The chief exorcist sent 39 of them. The king's personal exorcist sent 56 and outranked the chief. When the omens turned bad, these men could tell the king of Assyria to step off his own throne. A substitute sat in his place to absorb the evil, while the real king waited under a ceremonial title. And he did it, repeatedly, at real political cost. That is what it looks like when magic is state infrastructure. So where is the witch in all this? She exists. Her name is Kashuptu, and look where she appears. She appears in Maklu, the burning. 8 tablets of incantations plus a ritual tablet. Nearly 100 spells. The whole thing runs across a single night in the month of Abu and ends with a washing at dawn. Figurines of the sorcerer are burned, drowned, crushed. The client is cleansed. Then the sun comes up. Now notice the direction it points. Maklu is a ritual against witchcraft, performed by the state's own exorcist. The witch is the adversary in the liturgy. The official is the one holding the torch. And the law is stranger still. Hammurabi's second paragraph deals with an accusation of sorcery. The accused goes into the river. If the river gives him back alive, the man who accused him is put to death. That is not a witch-hunting statute. That is a law that makes accusing your neighbor extremely dangerous. And the most widely circulated English translation of Hammurabi drops the word sorcery from that paragraph entirely. Now Greece, where our word for the whole subject comes from, it arrives as an insult. Start with the most famous witch in European literature and the fact that Homer never calls her one. Circe, Book 10 of the Odyssey. Homer's actual phrase is Deine Theos Audiessa, a dread goddess who speaks, daughter of Helios the sun, and of Perse, whom ocean fathered, divine on both sides of the family. The Greek word for witch, polypharmakos, does not appear, nor magos, nor goes, not once in the whole episode. What Homer calls her instead is polypharmakos, she of many drugs. It is a remark about competence, and her method is pharmacological. Cheese, barley, honey, wine, baneful drugs mixed in, then a stroke of the wand. The men become swine, heads, voices, bristles, shape, and then Homer adds the line everyone drops. Their minds remained unchanged. That is the horror of it. They know. They are still in there, watching. Odysseus survives on a counter-drug, moly. Black at the root, milk white at the flower, hard for mortals to dig. And who hands it to him? Hermes, a god. Hermes of the golden wand against a goddess with a long wand. That is the real shape of the scene, not a hero against a witch, one god's tool against another's. And the same Greek noun covers both. Pharmakon. Her drugs are baneful pharmaka. His is a good pharmakon. Poison, remedy, enchantment, one word. Greek could not separate them, and honestly, neither can we. Now Hecate. And this is the widest gap between a text and its reputation anywhere in Greek myth. Everybody knows her as the goddess of witchcraft, torches, crossroads, black dogs, ghosts, the moon. So, open Hesiod, around 700 before Christ, the earliest sustained account of her that we have. Zeus honors her above all others. She holds a share of the earth and the sea and the heavens. She sits beside kings in judgment. She gives victory in war and glory to men who contend at the games. She stands by horsemen. She fills the fisherman's net. With Hermes, she increases the herds in the byre. Zeus makes her nurse of the young. She is, in the oldest source, a goddess of things turning out well. There is no witchcraft in that passage, no crossroads, no dogs, no ghosts, no moon, none of it. It arrives slowly. Ghosts by the 5th century. Necromancy in Hellenistic poetry. The witch goddess by the 1st century after Christ. No artwork links her to the moon before the Roman period. The transformation takes roughly 800 years. That is not scholarship recovering what she really was. That is accretion, and we are standing at the far end of it. The same happens to Medea. Hesiod names her once in a genealogy. Neat-ankled Medea, granddaughter of the sun, no drugs, no spells, and in Euripides 2.5 centuries later, she is terrifying for a different reason. Creon calls her clever by nature and versed in many evils. Sophie, the same word used of poets and philosophers. Her own line is that the direct route is best, because drugs are the thing they are most skilled at. Priestess of Hecate, gathering herbs by moonlight. That is Apollonius, writing in the 3rd century before Christ. 400 years after Hesiod. The Medea everyone pictures is an Alexandrian redesign of an older princess. Even her worst crime is late. Earlier versions had the Corinthians kill her children, or Medea kill them by accident. She was trying to make them immortal, and it went wrong. The deliberate murder is almost certainly Euripides. And now the word itself. Magic. It is not a Greek idea at all. It is Persian, and it starts as ethnicity. The Magoi were a priestly tribe of the Medes. Herodotus lists them quite flatly among 6 Median tribes. Plato can use the word straight. The Magian lore of Zoroaster taught to Persian princes. He calls it the worship of the gods. And in the same century, Sophocles uses it as a gutter insult. Oedipus, raging at the blind prophet. He calls him a magos, a stitcher of schemes, a deceitful beggar priest, a fraud working for hire. Same word, 2 values. Respectable religion when it is theirs at home, charlatanry when it is theirs over here. That is the whole mechanism, lying exposed in Athenian Greek. Magic is the name we give to somebody else's religion. North now, to the figure everyone thinks they can picture, the vulva. The word means staff carrier, from volar, a staff. She is defined by the object in her hand, and we have exactly one detailed portrait of her. 1. In the entire surviving Norse corpus. The Saga of Eric the Red, Chapter 4. Famine in Greenland. A farmer sends for a seeress. Her name is Thorbjorg, and she is called the Little Vulva. The saga dresses her with obsessive care. A blue mantle set with stones down to the hem, glass beads, a black lambskin hood lined with white catskin, shaggy calfskin shoes with long thongs and heavy knobs, catskin gloves, white and furred on the inside, a belt with a charm pouch on it, the staff with the knob mounted in brass and set with stones. They give her a high seat with a cushion and feed her the hearts of every animal they can lay hands on. And she cannot work until somebody sings. She needs the ward songs. Nobody in the house knows them. Finally, a young Christian woman admits her foster mother taught her the chant years ago in Iceland. She sings. The seeress says spirits have come who would not come before. Then she says the famine will end. Now, everything you have ever seen of a Norse seeress comes out of that one paragraph. Every costume, every drawing, one scene in one saga written down roughly 250 years after the events it describes. The archaeology is more interesting anyway. At Hecate in Denmark, a woman was buried in fine blue and red with gold thread. Silver toe rings found nowhere else in Scandinavia. 2 bronze bowls, possibly from Central Asia. A silver amulet shaped like a chair. A box at her feet holding owl pellets and small bones. Henbane seeds in a purse. And an iron rod with bronze fittings. The National Museum of Denmark calls it a staff that may have been used for magic. Their own page title ends in a question mark. And notice the loop we are standing inside. The rods are called magic staffs because the sagas describe staffs, and the sagas feel confirmed because the rods exist. That is not evidence, that is an echo. What is not in doubt is that these were rich graves. Whatever these women were, they were not buried as outcasts. Now the practice itself. Cedar, and the famous claim that it was shameful for a man to touch it. Snorri Sturluson, writing around 1225, says, Odin knew the skill of greatest power and worked it himself. Then Snorri says this sorcery brings so much ergi that men could not practice it without shame, so priestesses were taught it. Ergi is not a polite word. The Victorian English translation everyone quotes renders it as weakness and anxiety. The Old Norse means sexual passivity, unmanliness. The most widely circulated translation quietly deletes the charge. 3 chapters earlier the same, Snorri says Freya taught cedar to the gods in the first place. A goddess brought it in. And in the poem Lokasenna, Loki taunts Odin for working cedar on an island and beating on a lid like a seeress. But read the stanza before it. Odin has just accused Loki of 8 winters underground as a woman bearing children. Both stanzas close with an identical line. The insult runs in both directions, and Odin throws it first. And here is the part that matters. Every text calling cedar shameful is 13th century and written by Christians. Snorri, 1225. The Eddic manuscript, around 1270. The Icelandic law codes, the 1260s. There is no Viking Age source saying cedar was a disgrace. That is a fact about the corpus, not an opinion about pagans. Whether the shame is old or new is genuinely open. What is certain is who wrote it down and when. Cross the Baltic, where the magic worker has the best job title on earth. In Finland and Karelia he is the Tietaja. It means, simply, the one who knows, not the one who journeys, not the one who is ridden by spirits, the one who knows. His power comes out of memorized text. Charms held word perfect in the head in an ancient meter, and the key to the entire system is a concept called synti, origin, birth. To master a thing you must recite where it came from. Know the birth of iron, and the iron obeys. Know the birth of fire, and the burn heals. The magic is not force. It is provenance. Look at the table of contents of the Kalevala, and the system shows straight through the literature. The origin of iron. The origin of the serpent. The birth of the 9 diseases. Whole cantos of etiology. Wainamoinen builds his boat by singing it together, and stalls 3 words short of finishing the hull. So he cuts his way into a dead giant's grave and tortures the words out of him from inside the belly. And the language kept the receipt. Noita, the modern Finnish word for witch, once simply meant shaman. It is cousin to the Sami Noiti. Christianity turned it pejorative. The one who knows survived intact. Now, Heian, Japan, which supplies the single hardest fact in this whole episode. Japan had a government ministry for divination, not a tolerated guild. A bureau in the civil service with ranks. The Onmyorio, the Bureau of Onmyo, written into the law codes at the start of the 8th century. The Taiho Code of 701 created it. The Yoro Code restated its permanent technical posts. It sat inside the Ministry of Central Affairs. It had ranked professors, hecate, on the state payroll. A doctor of astronomy, a doctor of the calendar, a doctor of the water clock, and a doctor of Onmyo. Read that list again. Timekeeping, astronomy, the calendar, and divination were all the same department. Not because that state was confused, because to that state they were obviously the same kind of work. Reading the sky to know when to plant, and reading the sky to know when to move the court, is one skill. The most famous officer of that bureau is Abe no Seimei, 921 to 1005. His life is well recorded. He advised emperors. He was a civil servant with duties and a rank. And from the late 10th century his family took the bureau over. The Abe clan held divination as a hereditary office. Everything you have seen of him in films came later. The Fox Mother, the paper servants, the 5-pointed seal. The Fox Mother story in the form everybody knows is a puppet play. Osaka, 1734. More than 7 centuries after he died. The magician is history. The magic around him is theater. West into the forest, to the most misread figure in European folklore. Baba Yaga. Iron teeth, a bone leg, a hut on chicken legs, and a reputation for eating children. Start with a correction that sounds small and tells you everything. She does not ride a broom. She rides in a mortar. She drives it with the pestle, and she sweeps her tracks away with the broom. All 3 in one clause of one canonical tale, and retellings garble it every time. The broom is Western. Now the reputation. In the actual tale collections, she is at least as often a giver as a threat. In Vasilisa the Beautiful, the girl is sent to fetch fire from the hut. It is meant to kill her. The yard is fenced with human bone, skulls with eyes on the posts, a lock that is a mouth full of teeth. And Baba Yaga sets her to work, tests her, and when she passes, hands her a skull with burning eyes. The girl carries it home. It stares at the stepmother and her daughters and burns them to charcoal by morning. Vasilisa it does not touch. The monster in the forest is the one who solved her problem. Vladimir Prompt gave that role a name. The donor. The figure met by accident who tests the hero and equips him. Baba Yaga, the bear, Frost, the mare's head. Different characters. Prop's point was that the function stays constant. Later he argued the hut stands on the border of the land of the dead, and the tale is an initiation, that the dead cannot see the living but can smell them, which is why she is blind and always sniffing. That was a hypothesis from 1946, not a document, but the ambivalence needs no theory at all. In one printed version of a Russian tale, 3 helpful old women guide the heroine on her way. In the other version of the same tale, the same collector calls all 3 of them Baba Yaga. Same slot, 2 labels. Helper and witch are interchangeable inside one man's own printed variants. And here is the fact that reframes the whole Slavic section. Russia barely had a witch craze at all. One study counts 99 trials across the 17th century. Another sample counts 227 cases, not tens of thousands. And roughly 7 in 10 of the accused were men, not women. The largest single group at risk were healers, then wanderers, then outsiders, people who traveled and knew things. And through all of it, the courts almost never asked about the devil. No pacts, no flight, no Sabbath. Muscovy had no developed demonology, so an accusation had no way to multiply. No pact means no accomplices to name, which is why the numbers stay in the hundreds. The European witch craze needed a theology to run on. Which brings us to Britain, where you can watch a magician get assembled out of spare parts. Merlin. Everybody knows him. Almost nothing about him is where you think it is. Layer 1 is Welsh, and he is not called Merlin. He is Myrddin, and he is a madman. A prophet who fled into the Caledonian forest after a battle and lived 50 years among the beasts. He talks to an apple tree. He warns a little pig about a king and his hunting dogs. He is broken, not powerful. Layer 2 is a 9th century chronicle, and it is a completely different person. A king needs a fatherless boy's blood to steady a collapsing tower. The boy they bring out argues the royal magicians. He shows them the hidden pool under the foundation, and the 2 dragons in it, red and white, fighting. Then he gives his name, Ambrose. And he says his father was a Roman consul. He is not fatherless at all. Layer 3 is Geoffrey of Monmouth, around 1136, and Geoffrey does his welding in public. He takes the Welsh madman and the chronicle's boy and states that this Ambrosius was also called Merlinus. He leaves the seam showing in the name, Ambrosius Merlinus. 2 men, 1 label, no apology. He also shifts the character back in time by decades so that he can stand beside Arthur. And he swaps the Roman consul for a demon. The boy's father becomes an incubus. That change is Geoffrey's. Layer 4, around 1200. Robert de Boron builds a plot around the demon. Hell engineered Merlin to be the Antichrist, and a priest baptized him at birth, which ruined the plan. Merlin is a failed apocalypse, repurposed as a kingmaker, and Robert gives us the sword in the stone. The most famous image in the whole legend arrives around 1200, and Merlin arranges it. It is a staged election. The ending arrives later still. A woman sealing him under a rock is 13th century French prose. So the mad Welsh prophet, the demon father, the sword and the tomb are 4 centuries stacked inside one man. And then there is Morgan, whose story runs the other way. It is the cleanest inversion I know of. Her first appearance in all of literature is around 1150 in a Latin poem by the same Geoffrey. She is Morgan, chief of 9 sisters on an island of apple trees, and she is a physician. She knows the useful properties of every herb. She can change shape and fly, and she takes the wounded Arthur to heal him. A generation later, Chrétien de Troyes calls her Morgan the Wise, and her ointment cures a hero's madness. She cures the exact affliction that defines Merlin in the Welsh lair. That is where she begins. Then the 13th century French cycles rebuild her. Now she is Merlin's student, Arthur's hostile half-sister, the Queen's enemy. By Malory in the 1470s, she is a villain for most of a very long book. And yet at the end, when Arthur is carried away to Avalon, Malory puts her on the barge. One of the grieving queens taking the king to be healed. He never explains it. He inherited 2 Morgans and shipped both. That unexplained barge is the 1150 healer, still sticking out of the 1470 villain like a fossil in rock. Cross the Atlantic and a different problem appears. Not layers of centuries, a layer of conquest. In Nahua thought there is the Nahuali, usually rendered as sorcerer or shapeshifter or transforming witch. He is bound to an animal counterpart, and the day of his birth in a 260-day count shapes what he is. Even in the record we have, he is ambivalent. Some communities gave such men standing in the religious hierarchy. Others answered an accusation of nagualism with violence. The same figure, opposite receptions in one culture. His patron is Tezcatlipoca, whose own animal counterpart is the jaguar, and who governs the distribution of wealth. But now the hard part, and it has to be said plainly rather than smuggled in. Almost everything we know about Aztec religion was written down after the conquest, under Spanish supervision. The Great Compendium was assembled by a Franciscan friar working with Nahua elders and students across decades. It is an extraordinary document. It was also produced to help an occupying power understand what it was governing. So when that record calls a Nahuali a black magician, the category is European and the pen is a friar's. We are not reading what the Nahua thought of their magic workers. We are reading what the conquest could hear of it. And the same distortion, 3 centuries later, produced the most damaging myth in this entire episode. In Yorubaland, the diviner is the Babalawo. The word is usually given as father of secrets. His system is Ifa, and it is not fortune-telling. UNESCO's own description is precise about this. He interprets a system of signs. He does not rely on oracular powers. Those are the words on the listing. The corpus is the Odu, 16 principal signs combining 16 by 16 into 256. Each carries verses, memorized. The entire library is held orally and passed from one Babalawo to the next. He casts a divination chain, or 16 sacred palm nuts, and reads which sign has come up. UNESCO proclaimed Ifa a masterpiece of oral heritage in 2005 and inscribed it in 2008. This is not a dead mythology. It is a living discipline with a curriculum practiced right now, today. So is Vodun. In Benin, the 10th of January is a national holiday for it, established in 1993. It has priests and priestesses, temples, initiations, and shrines that have been maintained for centuries. And then there is the word most English speakers know it by, and everything attached to that word. The zombie and the pin-stuck doll are not this religion. They were manufactured, and we can date the manufacture. The United States occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934. Americans went, and Americans wrote books. A sensational travel book in 1929. A film built on it in 1932, the first feature-length zombie picture. A memoir by an occupation officer in 1933, describing a prisoner sticking pins into an effigy. The doll itself descends from the European puppet. Nailed Congo power figures were something else entirely. They were instruments of justice, used to bind oaths and hunt down wrongdoing, closer to a courtroom than a curse. 19th century collectors labeled them nail fetishes and misread them completely. A European object, wearing an African misunderstanding, sold under an American brand name. So step back and look at the whole board, because a pattern is standing there in plain sight. Egypt, temple staff, licensed with a restricted archive. Mesopotamia, 5 exorcists inside the king's inner circle. Japan, a ministry with professors and ranks. Yorubaland, a memorized corpus of 256 signs. Finland, a man whose power is knowing where things come from. Greece, a goddess of fishermen and judges. Tradition after tradition, the magic worker is not the enemy of the institution. He is the institution. And the same act, done in the same room, gets 2 different names depending on who is doing it. The exorcist of Nineveh burns figurines all night and is paid by the crown for it. The witch in his incantations does something very similar and is the reason the ritual exists. The lector priest reads from the house of life and is a priest. The same man, the same role, aimed at the king, is a criminal. Look at what actually changes in each case. Not the technique, not the tools, not even the words. What changes is authorization. The line between the priest and the sorcerer is drawn by power, from above, which is why the malevolent outsider witch keeps turning out younger than the tradition she supposedly haunts. Hecate needed 8 centuries to become a witch. Morgan needed 100 years to go from doctor to villain. Cedar's shame is attested only after the conversion. Noita only became an insult once there was a church to say it. And where the theology to build her never arrived, she barely appeared at all. Muscovy tried a couple of hundred people across a century and never once asked a single one about the devil. No pact means no accomplices. No accomplices means no panic. The machine had nothing to run on. The witch is not something humanity discovered in the dark. She is something written by people with a reason to write her. And the figure underneath, in almost every tradition on earth, is stranger and far less theatrical. The one who knows the origin of iron, the one who can read the signs, the one who carries the festival scroll. Not a monster at the edge of the village, a specialist, usually on the payroll and usually indoors,